Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to a review of the M36 Jackson, formerly known as the M36 Slugger, one of the American Tier 6 tank destroyers. Perhaps slightly counterintuitively, this is on the non-turreted American tank destroyer line, despite the fact that it very clearly has a turret, much like its forebear, the M10 Wolverine. Where does this thing fit in historically? Well, this is actually a slightly odd machine in that most tanks within World of Tanks are buffed compared to their historical versions. So they're given a gun that they never actually use. Like the Tiger is given the Tiger 2's 88mm gun, for example. The Jackson's the opposite. There are modules that were given to Jacksons in real life that would make it better than the version that you have in the game, but they are not given to it in the game, presumably to make it fit into Tier 6. Anyway, what was this thing? Well, in a slightly strange move, this was developed by the Americans, not in response to any particular battlefield need, but as a response to a need that some of the American military perceived was going to come about. So development started on this before the first encounter with the Tiger or Panther tanks, but some members of the American military saw the evolution of German armour. Saw a next stepping stone would inevitably lead to thicker armour, angled armour that would be hard to beat, and hard for the 75mm gun used by the M10 Wolverine to defeat. This is a little bit unusual because it flies in the face of American doctrine. The way the American military worked was by having, in order for a machine to be developed, or in order for a new weapon to be used on the battlefield, there had to be a need for it reported back by the troops on the ground, essentially. I'm simplifying things somewhat, but there we go. And it's for reasons like that that the Americans continue to use the M4 Sherman. Many people say, why did you keep using the M4 Sherman, and why did it still have that stubby little 75mm gun? Well, most of the time, if you are out in the fields of France fighting the Germans, most of the time the target you're going to come across is a dug-in machine gun emplacement or anti-tank gun, that would be driven around by a car or towed by a horse or something. It's not a tank, so you just want something capable of delivering a relatively decent high explosive shell to the target. And the Sherman was a reasonably popular machine, despite its flaws, and so there was no considered battlefield need to really replace it for a long time. Anyway, this machine was developed specifically to counter future German designs. And it's a good thing too, because then of course the Tiger and the Panther tanks came along. And it was designed from the outset with this 90mm gun. So a very powerful gun, designed to make a horrible mess of whatever it came across. It was a tank destroyer, it was designed to be a tank destroyer. It served throughout the Second World War, well, after its introduction, and it also served after the Second World War as well, serving, for example, in the Korean War. And when, for example, there were a lack of Pershing tanks, this was a machine that could be called upon to defeat any Soviet or Chinese armoured fighting vehicle at the time. This 90mm gun was perfectly happy and capable of putting holes through IS and IS-2 tanks, for example. And actually, this machine saw service with some of the European nations as well, and one nation in particular, I think it was then Yugoslavia, though I could be wrong on that score, but one in particular took the 500 horsepower engine out of the T-55 main battle tank and shoved it in this, giving it a 500 horsepower engine, which is more than the 420 horsepower engine you get as the top engine in the game. So that's what I mean by this thing actually sometimes having a module that would make it better than it is in game. Anyway, what is it that we actually get in game? Well, this is a Tier 6 tank destroyer. You get 590 hit points, which is kind of par for the course for Tier 6 tank destroyers, if we're going to be brutally honest. I mean, for example, compare it to the M18 Hellcat, that has 570. Have I got any other Tier 6 tank destroyers to compare it with? I probably haven't, because... oh, the Jagdpanzer 4, that's got 600. So 590 is kind of par for the course among the Tier 6 tank destroyers. It's basically a 30-ton machine with a 420 horsepower engine, meaning that this thing, okay, it's not It's not going to whiz around the battlefield like streaked lightning, but it's mobile enough. Traverse speed of 30 degrees a second, again, is good enough, and combine that, well, and really you're going to be using that traverse speed because the turret traverse, and of course this does have a turret, is 16 degrees a second, which is god-awful. But at least it gets a turret, unlike, for instance, the Jagdpanzer IV, which most definitely does not. Hull armour, 114, well, we need to be a little bit careful. That 114 is actually only this lower plate part. The upper plate here is thinner than that, but we'll talk more about that later on. 25 on the side, 25 on the rear. I can't show you the rear, alas, because of this silly wargaming garage at the minute. Turret armour, 25 on the side, 25 on the rear. There is actually a slab of 57mm thick on the rear, but again, we'll get to that more in a moment. 76 on the front. Again, that's a very limited area that has that armour thickness. In short, better armour than the Hellcat, but not fantastic. We will talk about the gun a bit more later on as well. Now, let's just quickly mention the view range. You may or may not be aware, but relatively recently, a bunch, I think it was patch 9.6, tank destroyers received a nerf across the board. Their view range got gimped. Generally speaking, the machines that were hit the hardest were the tier 4s. They had view ranges. They used to have like 400 meter view ranges, which was utterly stupid. And that's been slashed down to something like 330 meters. Which is a big hit, but they really needed it. Some of the other machines, some of the higher tier machines, have lost a few tens of meters of view range here or there. The American turreted tank destroyers, mid-tier tank destroyers, have kind of remained a bit untouched, which I find strange, because I think the two American machines, the Hellcat and the Jackson, are probably the best tier 6 TDs to start with anyway. So, for example, M10 Wolverine, 370 meter view range, Jackson, 370, T25/2, 380, Hellcat, 370, M8A1, now this was a tier 4, 320, that got hit, and so did the T67 because this was people's seal clubbing machine of choice. But the Hellcat, the Jackson, the Wolverine, the T25/2 all have 370, 380, compare that with its stablemate the Jagdpanzer IV, 350, and that's pretty typical for a lot of mid-tier tank destroyers now. But the Jackson's still sitting pretty on 370, which is nice. Signal range is 615 meters, but no one ever got excited about radios, so frankly, who cares? It gets the job done. Now, this is a tank destroyer, and tank destroyers are all about the gun, so let's talk about the guns. As I say, historically, this was designed to use the 90mm M3 gun, and that's the gun you're going to be using. So I'm not actually going to talk about the 76mm gun for now. So what do you get? It's a 90mm gun, 7.5 rounds a minute, 160 average penetration, which goes up to, yes, you read that correctly, 243 with APCR. American 90mm guns get very high penetration with their premium rounds. 240 alpha, HE round is 45 pen for 320 alpha damage. Dispersion at 100 meters is 0.35, which is pretty good, and a nice 1.7 second aim time, and unlike the Hellcat, that doesn't get completely wrecked by the gun's soft stats. So the gun is pretty decent. It's not the best gun to be mounted on a tier 6 tank destroyer. The DPM of this machine is 1800. Compare that to the Jagdpanzer IV, which breaks 2000. Ditto for the AT-8. The Hellcat is a bit lower, 1694. Basically, if you compare this gun to the other tier 6 tank destroyer guns, it's the second worst, falling only ahead of the Hellcat, really, in most respects. But you get a turret. So that's kind of the trade-off. And while this may not be the best gun to be mounted on a tier 6 TD, it's a pretty good gun. It's only really going to come across some problems against tier 8s. So let's have a quick talk about the grind on this machine if we just look at the American TD tech tree. So we are here on the American tank destroyers. In order to get to the Jackson, you go through the T-18, which is a god-awful overpowered little machine that's being turned into an artillery piece, which I find hilarious. Then you get to the T-82 at tier 3, which loses the armour of the T-18, but gains a redonkulously big gun, and still retains mobility. T-40 at tier 4, the redonkulously big gun remains, but of course you're a tier higher, so it's not quite as good now. But you do have an option of mounting a very nice 76mm gun. Still a fixed casement tank destroyer, slight armour upgrade, but your armour's not really all that great. I mean, it's a pretty decent machine. It used to be overpowered as all hell. It's been nerfed a bit now, but it's still a pretty decent machine. Wolverine at tier 5, I have a dedicated review of that machine if you want to go and have a look at it. It's a good tank, and the Jackson really is the spiritual successor to that machine. When you get the Jackson, you will have the 76mm gun from the Wolverine. You had to unlock it on the Wolverine, although you could have actually unlocked it down here. In fact, is that the same gun? Oh no, this is the M1A2, I do apologise, it's the stock gun. Sorry, you will not have this gun. You will have this gun from the Wolverine, but you won't have it from the T40. Sorry, I'll get my guns right in a moment. 128 pen, 115 damage. If you've played any of the American mid-tier tanks, you'll be intimately familiar with this weapon by now. It's not a bad gun for a stock gun when you're top tier, but when you're in a tier 7 or 8 game, this is starting to look a little bit lackluster. You have the stock turret, radios. Do you get the top radio? Whoa, if you've played many of the other American light tanks, you'll probably have the radio. In fact, you get it on the Wolverine anyway, so you'll already have this. But frankly, who cares? Engines you will have from the Wolverine, and the suspension you'll have to get yourself. So there isn't actually that much to unlock on this tank from the stock configuration. You just need the suspension, the turret, and the gun. What would be my recommended order? Well, I can't remember if you can, but assuming you can mount the top gun on the stock suspension, make that priority number 1, although if you can't, get the suspension first. Or use the enhanced suspension module. Once you've done that, then get the turret. I mean, it improves the gun stats, but you want to get the gun as soon as you possibly can. Boom. So, what else do you need to know about this tank? Crew skills and equipment. Let's start off with equipment. So, you are a machine with a turret. You are a tank destroyer with a turret. What advantages does this give you? Well, firstly, it allows you, in the right situation, to play a bit more like a medium tank. And secondly, it means you can bring your gun to bear without having to move your entire vehicle, which means that you retain a lot more of your accuracy as you traverse the turret. And it also means that if you are using a camo net or binocular telescopes, they are not going to reset, and your camo vating is not going to reset, and it's all absolutely dandy. With that in mind, I would recommend, because at the end of the day this is a tank destroyer and you do have to play it like one, camo net, binocular telescopes. The turret does them the world of good. Next piece of equipment, gun rammer. It's a good choice. This counts as an open-topped machine, so no vents. And what other options have you got? Toolbox? No. Fuel tanks with CO2? No. Gun laying drive? Sucks. Coated optics? Binos are a better choice. Spool liner? That's a joke. Vertical coils, well, you're only going to be using these for a short amount of time, possibly if you can't mount the gun on the stock suspension. Wet ammo rack? No. So basically, it's gun rammer, binos, camo net. I really do think that the equipment on this tank is a no-brainer. Consumables, I've got your standard 3 consumables. You might want to look into using, where is it? Can this use premium fuel? Good lord. It can't use premium fuel, or any sort of fuel. Well, that does surprise me. I was going to say you might want to look into using fuel on this machine, but apparently that is not an option. Huh. Okay, no fuel. The reason I was going to suggest fuel is that it would increase your turret traverse speed, among other things, but apparently you can't use it. You might want to use a case of cola instead of the manual fire extinguisher, because I don't remember this thing ever catching fire, to be honest. Are you willing to fork out for the cola? That's up to you, really. Obviously, it will improve the machine, but that doesn't come cheap. If you're going to do that, buy it on discount. Crew skills. 6th Sense for your commander, because you are not stupid. Seriously, 6th Sense is an amazing skill. You want it as, well, perk, technically. You always want it if you can take it. If you're retraining your crew skills for gold, by all means, pick something like Mentor, or Camo, or Repairs, and then retrain your commander. Drop his skills for gold, retrain for 6th Sense. If you are not doing that and you are retraining for credits, I personally prefer to get 6th Sense as soon as I possibly can. Other skills, well, I must admit I hadn't actually noticed that it's quite such a hodgepodge on this machine. How strange. You can make a case for a variety of different skills. Camo is a very good choice. You're a tank destroyer. Try and be sneaky. Try not to get shot. Repairs is also not a terrible idea for when those opportunities present themselves and you do end up playing a little bit like a medium tank with a big gun. Clutch braking is also not a terrible idea. Your turret traverse sucks. Your traverse speed isn't exactly great. I mean, the Jagdpanzer's traverse speed is 35 degrees. So clutch braking is also not an awful idea. I am wondering where I got this crew from. It's my American tank destroyer crew. I'm just surprised that their crew skills are quite so eclectic. I haven't noticed any engine setting on fire problems with this machine. I haven't noticed any ammo rack problems with this machine, so don't worry too much about safe stowage and all that jazz. I really would recommend Sixth Sense and then some combination of repairs or camo. Take your pick. And eventually, of course, you can get yourself Brothers in Arms, which is always an option. So, a quick note on Playstyle, just to finish this section of the video off. With 160mm of pen, average, 240 alpha damage, what you are generally doing is trying at the beginning of a game to play like a tank destroyer. If you are in a tier 8 game in particular, you might find that the penetration on your gun is a little lacking, which leaves you with a couple of different options. You could just switch over to the ridiculous premium ammunition on this tank and put 240? Yeah, 240mm of average penetration through the front of a KV-4. That is an option. And frankly, that penetration is competitive at tier 10. It's ridiculous. But anyway. Or you could take advantage of opportunities to get into positions where you can flank people and put shots into their sides, which is, in my opinion, a much better way of doing it. HE rounds on this tank are not bad, so use them when necessary. But it's kind of that mix. The turreted American tanks, and I think the Jackson in particular, kind of have that mixture of a tank destroyer and a medium tank kind of playstyle. When you're top tier, your armor can bounce shots. Be a little wary of the caliber of your opponent's guns, because there are some areas where they will just penetrate and there's nothing you can do about it with the right gun. But we'll talk more about that in a bit. And this is a very fun machine. Anyway, we'll have a look at the armor, go and play some games, and just get on with things. Alright, so time to have a quick look at the armor profile of the Jackson, and it's a little bit of a mixed bag. So, first thing to note, most of this tank is 25mm thick, which means that you can be completely overmatched by a 75mm gun, and at tier 6, 75mm guns and larger abound. So don't expect to bounce things with your side armor. Know what caliber gun you're facing. If you're facing a 75mm gun or larger, do not angle this tank, because they can just put shots straight through this side armor and there's nothing you can do about it. The rear of this armor is utter trash, 25mm thick. There's a slab down here that's 25 plus 19mm of spaced armor. That's very rarely going to save you though. Interestingly, it's one of those TDs that on the back of the turret has a slab of slightly thicker armor, 57mm in this case, but people can just pen this with HE from the rear and indeed from the side. Your armor, what you have of it, is on the front. So what armor do you have? Let's talk firstly about the front of the hull. Much like the M3 Lee and the M10 Wolverine, the armor scheme on the front of this hull is split into two parts. You have this upper plate, and then what would traditionally be considered the lower plate here, just below this rivet line. So the upper plate is 60mm thick, plus sloping makes it sort of 70 odd millimeters thick. If you're using your gun depression, you can accentuate that angle to 80, 90, possibly maybe hitting something close to 100mm of effective armor. So this can be kind of bouncy. If people shoot your lower plate, just giggle, because this is actually 114mm thick. And even just facing this thing straight on, 150, 150, 114, auto bounce, don't shoot the Jackson here. You're wasting your time. The turret is a bit of a mixed bag. So the turret, on paper, is 76mm thick, and while that is true, that is only for this section here. You've got a pretty chunky gun mantlet going over it, and so you've got regions where you've got 234 effective armor right there, for instance, but you've also got regions where there's no armor from the turret, there's just the gun mantlet, and you're down to 70 odd millimeters thick. Also, slight problem here, that 25mm of side armor loops round to the front, and these bits here, the turret, what you would usually consider the turret cheeks, are actually side armor. So again, you can auto penetrate that with 75mm guns and bigger, which is a bit annoying. So essentially, if you are facing a Jackson from the front and all you can shoot is the turret, try and shoot it in these cheeks, or kind of straight through the gun where there is no actual turret armor, it's just spaced armor from the mantlet. The roof here, just to point out, this used to not actually be a hitbox. I'm not sure now if it is a hitbox. This is the upgraded turret. because the stock turret doesn't have that. I've got a funny feeling, despite what Tank Inspector might be trying to tell you, that this roof is probably still not a hitbox, so it's probably not worth shooting. But feel free to verify that yourselves, I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, this does have some armour from the front. In order to make the most of it, you want to use all your gun depression. The side armour's utter trash, the rear armour's utter trash. Against many guns, you can't even afford to angle this thing, or people will just shoot you there if they've got any common sense. If, of course, they haven't got any common sense, they'll still try and shoot your front, and you'll have greater effective armour. So I guess try and judge the calibre of the opponent that you are up against. Having said that, let's go and show you some gameplay. Alright, so here we are, top tier. This is a game on... what is the map? Mountain Pass. There we go. Mountain Pass. Tier 6 game, obviously, as we are top tier. North spawn. And we're going to see what we can do. Now, the Jackson, as I mentioned, it does actually have some armour. And certainly when you're top tier, and especially if you're willing to use that gun depression, it's enough armour to actually get some bounces from people, which is nice. The 90mm gun performs better than the same gun on the Hellcat. And you can see here that while the Jackson is not the fastest machine in the world, you'd be hard-pressed to call it slow. So initially, I'm just going to see if this M8A1 is going to spot any of the bad guys on the other side of this, lake thing. And if he does, I'm going to put big fat shells through their face. So far, it doesn't appear that he's seen anyone. Oh, T1 Heavy though. Alas, no shot is available on the T1 Heavy. Stug 3G. I can just about pick out a shot on the Stug, but it bounces. I've got 160mm of average penetration, but... ooh, replay derp. But that was a pretty slim shot, and kind of dodgy angle. So the shots there are nothing too special, and so I'm going to move around to the next bush, and you can see that initially I'm using this in a very traditional tank destroyer role. This is a tank destroyer at the end of the day. It might have a turret and its mobility may not be too shabby, but there's kill number one. But if you try and use this, you know, like a medium tank or something all the time, you're going to have problems with your turret traverse, you're going to have problems in close combat, and the enemy team's probably going to ruin your day. Put a shot into that T1 Heavy, leaving him on 203 health, and if I'm going to get this shot... oh well, I put the shot into the Matilda instead. So both of these guys are relatively low health. Certainly they're in the one-shot range for me, and we kill that T1 Heavy. Matilda manages to back off out of the way, however, which is a little sad, but there we go. Anyway, that's kill number 2. And you can see that 240 alpha damage when you're top tier is quite a good chunk of people's health. It means that, for instance, tier 5 heavy tanks are typically dead in 3 shots. Tier 6 heavy tanks are typically dead in 3 to 4 shots. You know, it's a very respectable amount of alpha damage. And there's that Matilda from earlier on. He has good armour, but he doesn't have good enough armour to shrug off a 90mm shell to the face. So now that we've racked up 3 kills, we're going to be a little bit more aggressive with this. And this is the flexibility that you get from having a turret. It means that you are able, when the situation calls for it, and when the opportunity presents itself, you are able to be more aggressive than you could be in a fixed casement TD. Ooh, that one hurt. And you've got a punchier gun than you have in the same tier medium tank, and it's just all round quite a nice package. And also the additional armour compared with the Hellcat allows you to play a little more aggressively, and it's a bit more forgiving. You get away with it a bit more. Now, we do take some damage from that Stug. He puts one probably into our turret somewhere. Nope, can't actually see where he hit. But we polish the guy off, and we're on 4 kills. And now we're coming up behind all these fellows. Crusader, he's a pretty reliable 2-shot. And as long as we don't roll ludicrously low with our second shot, we should manage to kill this guy. You really coming out, dude? Oh, that shot missed. But you can see, we bounced him. Little 6-pounder gun on the Crusader, not really up to the task of reliably penetrating us. And there we go, 2 shots to kill that. Well, he's technically a tier 5 light tank, but in terms of performance and health, it's more a tier 5 medium tank. Cheeky goes down, and we're winning this 12 kills to 8. There's only the 3 of them left. VK T150 have last been spotted on the bridge. Don't know about the Panzer IV. Oh, there's the T150. To your left, Chip, to your left, and the VK. There we go, I finally notice. And I'm going to see if I can put some shots into these guys' sides. I mean, they're likely to kill this KV-1S. Oh, there's the Panzer IV. Excellent, other people will kill him. They're likely to take out the Panzer IV. Oh, but I don't actually have shots on these fellows. Now, I could move forwards to try and take these guys out, or I could move backwards and try and put a bit of ranged fire in. But then I'm going to have problems spotting them. So, Jackson has 10 degrees of gun depression. Let's move forward and use it. T150 was in the sort of 1 to 2 shot range. VK looked like he had quite a lot of health left. And we're just going to try and polish these guys off. There's only the 2 of them remaining. They're completely screwed. T150, alas, no. Put a shot, low damage roll, but put a shot into that VK. VK has the stock turret, unfortunately for him. And he's going to keep trying to challenge us. Oh, and that shot misses. Oh well, never mind. C'est la vie. These guys are trying to pressurise me. Oh, someone else puts a shot into the VK. I take some damage and fluff that shot. I'm trying to be a little bit cautious, and I'm mainly trying to light these guys up actually for the people behind me. Yeah, I know, tank destroyer playing the role of the scout. Oh well. T150's on low health, the VK has a small gun, so I'm just going to risk the damage to polish off the T150. Someone else puts a shot into the VK and I'm able to finish him off for 7 kills. And so there you can see, the armour bounced a few shots, shots that the Hellcat could never have bounced. The gun performed fairly well. I should point out I didn't have a 100% crew when I played this. The crew were, 90-something%. They were close to 100, but they weren't actually 100. So yeah, you could see the armour there, you can see the gun performance, and you can see that the mobility, while not as good as the Hellcat, was still perfectly adequate for getting the job done. And that ended up being a nice little game. So, go and have a look at the post-battle results, and then we'll have a game where we are at the bottom of the feeding pool. Here we are with a tier 8 game. We are on Redshire. It's a standard game. And in this sort of matchmaking, you really do notice the lackluster penetration, in particular, on the American 90mm gun. On the tier 6 tank destroyers, I mean, I say lackluster, it's not that bad, but it's just a bit lackluster compared to a lot of the other tier 6 TDs. 160 is at the bottom end of tier 6 tank destroyer penetration. 240 alpha damage is still very respectable. Anyway, so I'm going to move forward into this bushy location. Why am I doing that? Well, this gun doesn't really have the punch to reliably go through the front of a number of the higher tier tanks on the enemy team. 112, need to aim for the lower plate, which you can do, but depending on the range that can be a problem. IS-3 can definitely be problematic. WZ-111, similar story for the 112 about the lower plate. Centurion, depends if it's hull down or not. Type 59 can be a serious problem. In fact, the Type 59's over to my left-hand side anyway. So, from this location, I was thinking I would be able to get, thank you Mr. IS-3, more flanking shots into the enemy tanks than if I had tried to go to something like J0. Ooh, goodbye Mr. Cheeto. So that's the plan. I'm trying to get flanking shots from this position. AMX-12T, and there we go. You can see 250 alpha damage is very respectable against someone like him. That shot misses, alas, which is a shame. I'd have liked to get another hit on that 12T, but There we go. You can't have it always. The 12T does eventually die. There's an M41 Walker Bulldog down there as well, who is a very dangerous machine, and we do need to pay a lot of respect to. There's someone over there in a medium tank, but I have better targets in the form of this Cromwell. Now, turret, of course, on the Jackson means that I can rotate the turret and therefore assign my gun to a new target without resetting my camo value, which is nice. Oh, that was a poor shot. That was a very poor shot, but oh well. Turret traverse on the Jackson is rather lackluster, as I've already mentioned, but nonetheless, having that turret is a distinct advantage. And this is very much your traditional kind of tank destroyer style gameplay. Although we're not right at the back, you know. Being right at the back would not be a good thing. This gun wouldn't really have the punch to hurt the enemy tanks then. So we need to be a little bit further forward. We need to preferably put shots into people's sides, into their rears. So, 112 there. Shots into his side, but it's only really his turret I can see, which is annoying. That shot doesn't even actually hit the target, let alone hit turret, but there we go. Hopefully I can get a bit of side hull armour there, and indeed I can. 261 into his side. And there's that Cromwell from earlier on. Is he going to stay there? Yes, he is. That was a mistake, wasn't it? Again, I don't have Sixth Sense on this, of course, at the time, I should mention, so I don't know if I've been spotted, but I was trying not to move my tank more than strictly necessary to try and keep the bonus of, in this case, specifically my camo net, but to a lesser extent also my binocular telescopes. So, don't have shots on that IS-3. If this 112 keeps going, I might get flanking shots into him. There's also a little ELC behind him, and there we go, 112, 257 into his side. And with any luck we can rinse and repeat. Oh no, he gets behind a rock. That's a shame. He's also no longer spotted. Ah, well, never mind. Tiger 2 over there. What sort of shots do we have on him? And the IS-3. IS-3 is angled kinda towards me, which makes it a little awkward. 112 again. Nah. Is he still behind the rock? Yes. Is he going to put... Oh, bum shots, bum shots, bum shots. Oh, I missed. Damn it. Ah, well, never mind. That 112 appears to be getting worked over by somebody. And indeed, he's dead. Walker Bulldog got him. Good man. So, IS-3 over here. Again, if we can get shots into his flank, then we can land some pain on him. There he is. Ooh, that did actually penetrate. I wasn't expecting it to because of the way he was angled, but it did, so I'm certainly not complaining. Tiger 1 up there. Nice, big, soft, squidgy XP pinata. Alas, no available shots. E25. That was a terribly aimed shot. That was never going to go anywhere near him in a month of Sundays. And we're winning this game 8-7. Still no shots on the Tiger, however. And there's the E25 from earlier on. Managed to take off a good chunk of his remaining health. Alas, the people over on the zero line have been whittled down to just a WZ-111 without a huge amount of health remaining. He's got 100 and something health left. No, 98, my bad. Or 96 or something. So this is a little bit of a dicey situation. This game is still close. We could still quite happily lose this. That shot, alas, didn't hit the target. So we certainly shouldn't be complacent about this, and their GW Panther just nailed our WZ. Have a blind shot in the direction of the IS-3, and indeed our artillery actually polishes the IS-3 off. So, there's the Tiger at C4, there's the Centurion over here, E25 somewhere in the back, and a couple of artillery. Now while this game is still close, in my mind, I think our team has a positional advantage, although you could probably argue the point either way. But now I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive and try to make use of my turret, and alas, only track damage on the Centurion. Centurion might put a shot into me, as indeed he does. But hopefully he's being closed in on by machines from all angles, and this guy is not long for this world. Bulldog is actually the one who picks up the kill. Tiger now. Can I possibly damage his track? Yes, I can. Oh. Well, the shot was good, just no track damage, which is a shame. Am I going to take another hit here? Entirely possible. And the Tiger gets obliterated. So, E25 and 2 artillery pieces remaining. And thank you very much, Jag Tiger, for killing that guy. So what do we do now? Well, E25 is a lot faster than I am. He seems to be off to go and find the artillery, but he's found the enemy E25 instead. Okay. Hopefully I can give this guy a hand against him. Oh, that shot didn't even hit the target, alas. And the E25 gets behind a bit. Oh no. So, E25 v E25. Ours has more health. Ours should hopefully win, but it does kind of depend here. There we go. Now ours starts laying some hits. It looks like our E25 is probably going to be reduced to a one-shot, but he does manage to kill the guy in question. GW Panther over there. Have a shot on the move, but I want to keep moving so that he doesn't kill me. Alas, predictive shot from the GW Panther means he does nail me. Good shot from him. But our E25 nails the GW, and that just leaves the Crusader SP. And I don't think I watched this game to the end. So there we go. That was the game. Didn't fire any APCR, bottom tier tank. We managed to perform reasonably respectably. So take a look at the post-battle results, and then we'll jump back into the garage to round things off. So what do I think of this thing overall? I think it's jolly good fun. And I'm actually going to keep it. I prefer it to its stablemate, the Hellcat. I think which machine you prefer will probably come down to a matter of preference in all likelihood. But for me, this is a damn fun machine. I'm keeping it. I do wholeheartedly recommend it to you. It's like a Wolverine, but at tier 6, which shouldn't come as a surprise, because the Wolverine, of course, was its little brother at tier 5, but I prefer the Jackson tier for tier compared to the Wolverine. I think the gun's a little punchier, even though usually I hate American 90mm guns. Anyway, yes, I thoroughly recommend this. I think it's an awful lot of fun, and I think with the Hellcat, it is one of the best tank destroyers at tier 6. In my opinion, the Hellcat and the Jackson are the two best, even after the Hellcat's nerfs, and especially after the view range nerfs to TDs, because the American turreted tank destroyers on the whole, or the American tank destroyers on the whole, seem to have kind of been left alone, which is weird, but there we go, whatever. I think, as I say, which one you prefer will come down to a matter of personal preference, but I do very much recommend both of those. One last thing to mention just before we finish: if you are interested in the American tank destroyer line, or either of them, then obviously you've got the non-turreted line and the turreted line. When you get up to tier 8 with the T28 prototype on the turreted line, if you have not already gone up the non-turreted line, the prototype becomes a horrific grind, because the T25/2 uses a 90mm gun, the T25AT uses a 105mm gun, and if you haven't already unlocked the 105 on the T25AT, you have to play the prototype with the 90mm gun from the T25/2, which is a horribly painful experience from everything that I have been told. So I recommend playing the T25AT and getting that 105 before you grind up the turreted line too far, and in order to do that you have to play the Jackson. That's how it links in. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that review, possibly even found it vaguely informative. Shock horror, I know. If you did enjoy it or find it informative, that is, please feel free to catch some of my other videos, including reviews, and or subscribe to my channel. And I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.